Good afternoon to you, our viewers. This is The Verdict, brought to you by NAQEZ and its cooperating partners, calling themselves the GEAR. And this is a project aimed at enhancing the availability of education for the girl child, especially those in rural areas. This is the second edition of this program. We couldn't have it last week due to the national mourning that the country was going through. However, we are here. Let's take a short breather so that when we return, we get into the conversation.
Oh, we testify, we celebrate.
Hello, I'm Deborah Lukalu, all the way from South Africa. You are watching Camnet channel, not just another channel. God bless you. Stay tuned.
We testify, we celebrate. For all you've done, Lord, we give you all the praise. Oh, we testify, we celebrate. Oh, for all you've done, Lord, we give you all. And bananas. Work and wait, and this what you've been praying for.
Welcome back. This is the People's Verdict, like I mentioned earlier, brought to you by the National Action for Quality Education in Zambia. Now, in a bid to create a better world, 193 countries agreed on 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 sub-goals at the UN General Assembly in September 2015 to be achieved by the year 2030. The SDGs provide worldwide guidance for addressing the global challenges facing the international community. They focus on protecting the natural fundamentals of life in our planet everywhere and for everyone, and preserving people's opportunities to live in dignity and prosperity across generations. The 17 goals cover all three areas of sustainable development, which are ecological, economic, and social. Notably, Zambia, Malawi, and Zimbabwe are among the countries in the sub-Saharan Africa which asserted to the core on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, also referred to as 2030 Agenda. In view of, therefore, the Girls' Education Advocacy in the Region GEAR project has identified Sustainable Development Goal number 4 as a cornerstone in its quest to advocate for increased access to quality education for girls in rural areas and farming communities. It is therefore imperative to mention that the progress is being made in the implementation of 17 SDGs. However, the implementation process has had its own challenges. Therefore, in order to effectively assess the implementation progress and impact it has had on improving the general well-being of the citizenry, there are review mechanisms that have been established as a way of providing feedback and an opportunity to peer learning. The voluntary national reviews, known as VNRS, and the voluntary local reviews, VLRS, are review mechanisms that help to track progress on the implementation of SDGs. They provide a platform of sharing challenges and best practices among countries in order to accelerate the 2030 Agenda and 2063. In the studio, I am joined by Rutherford MUMBA, who is the admin manager for National Action for Quality Education, and also returning on our set is Mr. CHANSA, who is the executive director for the organization. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Quite a lengthy introduction.
Very mouthful.
I had to swallow my saliva a couple of times.
But I must say that you read very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've given a very elaborate introduction.
Just a recap, this is the second edition. Last week we were talking about Sustainable Development Goal number 4, and we talked about at length. Maybe just as a connection to this interview, this conversation that we're yet to have, maybe we can remind our viewers in about a minute of the connection between that and this.
Very important, Sharon, that we do that. Because I recall that in 2015, in July, all UN member countries, 193 member countries, agreed to sign what is famously called Vision 2030. Now, if you remember, and our viewers can remember, in 2015, we were just winding up with what we called the Millennium Development Goals. So after the completion of that phase, the world still recognized that certain things were still not well done, and the global community crafted for itself 17 goals, which were called Sustainable Development Goals. And from that time up to now, all countries are actually required to consistently implement policies, programs in order to achieve those goals. One of the goals, as you ably said, is SDG number 4, which talks about access to quality education by everyone. Everyone who wants to access quality education. It's the primary responsibility of every country to make sure that these people are given that kind of education. So that's why we are here to try and give this information to our people, to the Zambian people, to say this signing was done by Zambia also. It was also done by Zimbabwe. It was done by Malawi and almost all countries in Africa, to make sure that the people of the world, the people of Zambia, the people of Southern Africa are actually availed the opportunity to access quality education.
All right, in case you are just joining us, you are watching The People's Verdict, brought to you by the National Action for Quality Education. And this afternoon, we are focusing our discussion on voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews, aimed at giving reviews with regards to progress made and the Sustainable Development Goals, among other agendas that the country has signed to. To kickstart this interview, now that you've given us the background, at least to connect us from last week to this week, what are VNRs or VLRS? I want to call them that.
Yes. Before my colleagues can come in, I want to be very quick, and I want to make it very plain to unpack what voluntary national reviews are. I talked about the ceremony or the period when Zambia was part of the global community in 2015, where the UN actually administered the Vision 2030. There were goals that were identified. I said there were 17. Yes, a lot of social and economic issues were covered under those 17. Here we are talking about education. Education fell under SDG number 4. And one of the conditions under which these SDGs were signed was that every country was supposed to give reports to the global community about the progress being made for all the 17 SDGs. So now those reports, one of them is what is called the voluntary national review. It is called voluntary because the government should be able to initiate this without being forced. Now, when you talk about government, government has got 3 arms: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. And as it were, the executive is the one responsible to do the voluntary national reviews. I'm sure as we go in details in this program, we should be able to unpack how this VNR is done. Every country actually is supposed to do this, give a report involving all stakeholders. Then there's a forum called the High Level Political Forum, which is held around July, where all countries give a report on each SDG. For example, on the access to quality education, Zambia is expected to go and give a report in terms of bursaries, in terms of access to education to girls, in terms of vocational training, all these aspects of quality education. There must be a report from Zambia, from Malawi, from Zimbabwe, to go and read. Other countries are listening from what Zambia is saying. Of course, civil society should be able to input so that the world should know where we are, the challenges that Zambia has, the challenges that Malawi is facing, the challenges that Zimbabwe is facing, so that those challenges can also be, maybe the world can come in and help in that regard. So voluntary national reviews are just processes or mechanisms through which reports are made about these SDGs.
Mr. Mumba, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, just coming from where Mr. CHANSA was explaining, and also to remind you that we may not, from last week we were talking about SDG number 4.
Yes.
Even in our discussion now, we may not depart so much from SDG number 4, because this is our pillar,
yes,
as National Action for Quality Education, and this project revolve around this pillar. So you also to say voluntary national reviews are a platform to share best practices by these countries that have signed and agreed, that met the 193 countries that you talked about, Sharon. Each country must review willingly how they have performed, yes, in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And they have to be honest in their review and presentation to other countries. Like, Sharon, you may be a farmer, I am a farmer, and we are both growing tomato. Yeah. Same hectareage, same land, but I'm having very good yield, and you are struggling. So you may want to know from me how I am getting high yield from the same hectareage. So there must be a forum, there must be time you and I should talk. I tell you, okay, I've succeeded in this because of ABCD reasons. And this is what voluntary national reviews addresses at national level, at international level. Then we have voluntary local reviews. Yes. These are gatherings and meetings and sharings that we have as a country within ourselves, like this organization need government and civil society. We just look at how we are doing as a country. While at national review, we present and report at international level. So what feeds into national review? National review is how we perform in our local reviews. I felt I should state that.
Brilliant. How often do we do these reviews? Because I'm meant to understand we've had Sustainable Development Goals for quite some time.
Yeah, these reviews should be done yearly.
Do we do that?
Zambia participated in 2020, and I think this year, from the position of government, it's not participating, and they are preparing to participate in the coming year. And so, like now, the government is busy putting bits and pieces together, and so our appeal also to government is to allow stakeholders to input and just sensitize. Let the country know. Let all the stakeholders that should input into the participation that the country is having into national reviews for next year are all involved and participate fully.
Maybe the viewer out there is wondering what is the difference or what is the connection between SDG and VNR, Mr. Johnson?
I think the connection is very strong because you can't talk about a voluntary national review without talking about sustainable development goals, because what we are reviewing are actually the targets that were set in 2015. Zambia has been under this arrangement for 6 years, from 2015 up to now. And as my colleague said, every year, each country which is a member of the UN should be able to have a voluntary national review. So that, as he was putting it, we sit down as stakeholders. Now, you also read in your introduction that there are 17 sustainable development goals. In those, each one of them has got targets. In total, we have got 169 targets. For the SDG number 4, we have got 10 targets. So when you talk about these targets, they need to be reviewed. We need to do what is called monitoring and evaluation. Now, what is very critical when you do these reviews is, first of all, inclusivity. It's not just government alone that must sit down and review. It should be the international community through the UN system in Zambia, the UN system in Malawi, and also Zimbabwe. It should be NGOs that are interested. For example, those are interested in gender issues. Some of us were interested in education, the government itself, the UN system, and other critical stakeholders sitting down and honestly review the progress, review the successes, review the challenges before you go and report to the international community. So the connection is very, very strong. You can't have SDG without VNRS. You can't have VNRS without the SDGs. So first of all, we had the SDGs. Now, as we implement, there must be these reviews so that you see whether you are meeting the targets or not. So the connection is very, very strong.
Mr. MUMBA?
Yeah, so like Mr. CHANSA puts it, SDGs exist, and SDGs, its existence or their existence should be checked by national reviews, voluntary national reviews. So actually, if like our SDG number 4, which talks about inclusive and equitable quality education, the national reviews or voluntary national reviews should question and check whether we have inclusive education and how far have we gone.
Yes.
We have equitable and quality education. Yes, we may have equitable education, but is it quality? Or is it qualitable? What are the levels of its quality? So it is national reviews or voluntary national reviews that will inform the performance of the country regarding the SDGs, all of them. So the two cannot be separated, just like Mr. CHANSA puts it.
For success to be attained, obviously it needs concerted efforts from various stakeholders.
Yes.
What is the role of government and the CSOs or various organizations championing quality education in this regard or pertaining to SDGs and VNRs? What is the role there?
I was checking through our constitution, our Republican constitution. I think it must interest our viewers to know that Article 8 actually enshrines that sustainable development is one of our values. So when Zambia was actually signing the SDGs, the implication there was that in all our legal, our policy issues, our programs, national programs, all the SDGs must be incorporated. So from a constitutional perspective, Zambia already is speaking SDGs. Look at the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan actually incorporates these SDGs. If you look at the one that we are actually doing away with, the 7th National Development Plan, most of the SDGs were actually incorporated in that SDG. Look at some of our programs. Look at the re-entry policy in education. Look at the free education policy that we now have in our country. They are all speaking to realization of the SDGs. Last week we were saying that we're only remaining with 9 years, if not 8. No, it's 8 years because we are in 2022. We are remaining with 8 years before the world could go and sit down to look at which country has actually achieved the SDGs, all of them, and which countries has not done so. So the stakeholders are very, very critical. If you talk about government, the role of government is actually to domesticate, to make sure that in all the policies, all the programs, all the laws, these SDGs are actually incorporated. Because when we are going to face the world through the UN as a country, it is not the chiefs, it is not the clergy, it's not the civil society organizations that are going to be held responsible. It is the government. Now, the government alone cannot effectively implement these policies. All the stakeholders, the chiefs have a role to play, because the chiefs are gatekeepers, especially in rural areas where this project is focusing. Because if you look at our girls in rural areas, a lot of them are falling out of the education system. A lot of them are getting pregnant. A lot of them are getting married off at early stages. You know, Zambia is one of the highest early marriages in the world at 42%. Look at the distances to schools. So our chiefs have a role to play in making sure that they remind our government to put more money in education. The citizens themselves. That's why NAQEZ has been on song, trying to chart a narrative that yes, the free education is wonderful, is very good, but we should not forget that this free education should be quality education. The civil society, like NAQEZ, we are very critical because if, for example, we leave government alone to write a report to go and present to the UN, there's a tendency, there's a likelihood that government might write a good story for this country. So we need to put government in check objectively, knowing that this is our country, so that if we strongly think that certain things are not done properly, it's the role of civil society to actually raise these issues, advise, sit with government, and make sure that the right things are done. It is also our role to do what we are doing, sensitizing members of the public, raising awareness about SDGs, raising awareness about and also the VNRS. But it is also another responsibility for government to actually involve all of us and make sure that these processes are popularized. People must know about these processes in order for them to take part in them.
Mr. Mumba, you seem itchy.
Yeah, I'm actually itchy. To answer the question, what is the role of government? Government is the driver. In this entire process, government is the driver. And the rest of us are gatekeepers. So it is the responsibility again of government to make sure these SDGs are implemented. Like Mr. CHANSA was saying, in Article 8, subsection F of our Constitution, it clearly states that development, sustainable development, is one of our values as a country. And so government must make sure it lives up to its commitment. And government has committed itself to developing the country. Now, you also realize that it's government wish and commitment to bring all these ills to zero, including poverty, hunger, marginalization of women and girls. All these things should come to zero. And that is what government wants, and that is what government is telling the people. And these things should come from sustainable development goals. So one, government must be the driver.
Yes.
And then other stakeholders, the civil society, the communities, corporate, private sector, and everyone else, even the elderly, the youths, should have input into these issues that government wants to bring to zero. So government is the driver. That is the role into sustainable development.
Actually, Sharon, before you, I know you have very interesting questions.
Yes.
but before you proceed, it's important that we look at also the issues of good governance.
Yes.
Because when you talk about government going to the UN to sign, it is not the individuals that signed. It is they are actually attaching that signing to the country. Now, a country is made up of the population, and good governance entails that national and international issues must be they must involve the citizens. So when you talk about SDGs, it's not about just the government; it's also about the people. And when you talk about society, society has a lot of players. The role of government is to involve the players, get feedback from the people, involve them, get the ideas, and move together as one. Otherwise, as you were saying, the government is the driver. Because government administers public resources. People are elected into office to provide for the people. So when the SDGs say that SDG number 4 should be about affording everyone access to quality education, lifelong education, giving them bursaries, these are the things that must provoke all of us to sit down and say, are we getting what is contained in SDG number 4? Do we have free quality education in our country? Yes, we have free education. Now, the people must also rise up and go to the schools and check. Do we have quality education in these classes? Do we have enough teachers? Because that's one of the targets. We need to have enough teachers, well-qualified teachers. We need to have enough desks, enough infrastructure. So these are the issues. And we hope that as we have these TV and radio programs interact with our people, we are going to provide enough information so that our people can come along, assist government, so that by the end of 2030, we must have this vision in our hands. We must own it. We must be a middle-income country. You know, when the Vision 2030 was signed, Zambia also had to domesticate, so that in our view, in the view of our government that time, we need to progress from where we are now to a middle-income country by 2030. This can't be done by government alone. All of us must get involved.
You've talked about quality education. I'm prompted to find out if you, as a CSO, have gone further to see if this free education is in tandem with also offering quality education. I know it's just about 3 months, but what is the general perspective with regards to this? I know we've talked about it off record.
Yes. And
other people have actually mentioned to say there's a lot of pupils that are coming back to school and we don't even have enough desks.
Obviously, when you look at the history of our education, we have had free education before. We stopped this in 1991. And when the president was campaigning about free education, a lot of issues were raised. Some people, the doubting Thomases, could not believe it. Now we are discussing this free education, a wonderful policy, of course, responding to the SDGs, providing education to everyone. Of course, as we sit now, as we speak now, this policy has got effects. We are seeing, it's not a secret, we are seeing overcrowded classes, and when you have pathetic teacher-pupil ratios, you detach free education from that scenario. When we have fewer teachers, when we have fewer desks, you detach free education from that class. So as we speak now, it would be very unsafe for anyone to say that we have quality education in our schools, in our public schools. We are going to give this policy some time before we judge it. We judge that, but we are not going to go to sleep excited that we have free education. We must be concerned about the quality of education that is being offered in our schools. There are a lot of learners sitting on the floor. We need more than 1.3 million desks. We need more than 45,000 teachers to be recruited in order for the teacher-pupil ratios to become much more healthier.
Mr. Mumba, should we compromise the quality of education at the expense of free education?
Sure. There is no way we should start debating quality. And there is nothing that should allow compromise on quality. But then, look, this free education policy has just come. And it is serving its teething problems. So we feel, like Mr. CHANSA puts it, we will not sleep, we'll check. What we are seeing now is this new policy trying to settle. It has come with these problems that are compromising quality. And now to balance between quality and quantity, it's very difficult. And we need to invest a lot of resources, financial resources, technology, and everything else into free education. Because we need to reduce pressure on infrastructure. Now, we are also happy, we should be happy that there is quite a huge amount of money allocated to Constituency Development Fund. And like we were putting it, a development should also be propelled by citizens themselves.
Yes.
This is the problem that we have seen as citizenry. What are we going to do? How are we going to use our CDF to reduce the problem? Because we are all excited. Everyone is happy because the children that fell out of school are back because of free education. So now government has brought in this initiative. Can we bring all the pupils, all the learners that dropped out? Now it remains to us who are now managing CDF. How are we going to spend it? Are we going to increase the infrastructure? Are we going to go for more teachers to be deployed? What are we going to do to reduce? Because these problems are now happening at community level where more resources have gone. And we want to believe the
25.7 million.
25.7 million can address that. It may not be done overnight, but then we must know we must not compromise quality out of anything. We must be consistent with quality, even as we promote quantity.
Yes, maybe Sharon, I like what he has said. You know, when you make a public policy, there are also what are called unexpected outcomes. What we are seeing now in our schools is an indication that a lot of our people could not afford education because of the PTA fees, because of the user fees that were being charged. Now, obviously, the system has also responded, but in a negative way, implying that the system was actually not ready for this policy. Because in some countries, you first put these factors. For example, you build more, you buy more desks, you recruit teachers. That's when you introduce this policy. But in our case, because we had no time to do that, maybe we didn't have resources to do that, we had to start. The policy has now informed us of things that we are supposed to do. If you check in the Yellow Book, the expanded budget for 2022, you will find that there is 2.1 billion kwacha allocated for school operations. Government has only released the 324 million kwacha, which in our view is not enough. Because when you divide our national academic calendar, it has got 3 terms. So when you divide 2.1 billion kwacha into 3, you have got 700 million kwacha per term. So we want to appeal to our treasury, to our president, to quickly release more than 400 million kwacha for term 1, because we have information that a lot more schools received inadequate funding. We have not seen any effort to go towards the purchase of desks. We have been going to schools the past 3 weeks. The scenario is not good for learning. Actually, it is also defeating the purpose of going to class. We also need to see efforts, I think in the next few weeks, going towards the recruitment of teachers. We have seen the Minister of Health advertising. We also want to see the Minister of Education advertising, so that by next month we can see 30,000 teachers recruited. People have been waiting for 5, 6, 7 years to be recruited, because once we have these immediate actions being done by government, then SDG number 4 will be answered. Then when we go to the VNR, when we meet as stakeholders, we'll have a good story to tell.
You're watching The People's Verdict. You too out there can call in and also send in those text messages via our social media platforms, and we'll be able to read those messages. Ask the panel here from the National Action for Quality Education in Zambia. Moving on, Mr. Chansa, how significant is the VNR in addressing learning barriers for girls in rural areas?
It's this process is extremely, and I'm happy the UN system had to put this feedback mechanism. The M&E in every project, this is a very important global project. We need to get feedback, because when you look at this project, we are trying to talk to government. We are trying to talk to the Zambian people, the Malawian people, the Zimbabwean people, the stakeholders in Malawi, Zimbabwe and Zambia, to get involved. When you have a proper VNR in place, it is going to X-ray, it is going to screen the whole process, because this process should not be a secret. This process must be national. Mr. Chisanga was saying it must be citizen-driven. I remember the famous phrase when we were trying to enact for ourselves a constitution, where people are saying, no, we need a people-driven constitution. Exactly. People-driven constitution, and it became a national anthem. So even this process must be people-driven. Government must just facilitate. It's more or less like a driver driving a bus and you're a passenger. When a driver is not observing traffic rules and is overspeeding, passengers have a right to say, I think my driver, Mwabutusha-san, can you reduce the speed? Can we sit here and see why our learners are sitting on the floor? So when you have a proper, objective and honest VNR, it is going to involve all stakeholders, the young people, the disabled, the women, the church, the NGOs. You sit down and honestly look at the process. Look at each and every SDG. Interrogate the processes and look at the gaps. Where are we making it all wrong? Is it the financing? Is it the funding to education? And how can we improve the funding, for example? How can we make sure that Zambia is no longer a country with the highest record in terms of early marriages? What can the chiefs do? What can trade unions do? What can the church do? What can NGOs do? So that the government can also tell its own story. Before you go to the international community to go and report, you must sit as a family so that you look at the weaknesses. For example, we are now proposing an education levy. We think that it's very, very important, because once we have this levy in place, we are going to rake in millions of kwacha in our coffers, so that we can build more boarding schools for our girls in rural areas. Because one of the issues that is a bottleneck to accessing education by those that are in rural areas is lack of boarding spaces. You find our girls are doing what is called weekly boarding. Yes. They move from their villages to the next school. They go on Sunday. They go and become desperate, much more prone to exploitation. And these are the things that we must be talking about as stakeholders and government. So these processes are critical. They must be encouraged, and we hope that next year Zambia is going to take part, so that we see what we've done from 2015 up to now.
Mr. Mumba, the GEA project is specifically concerned with girls in rural areas and farming areas. Is it the same narrative with Zimbabwe and Malawi? I know this project is under these countries as well. Do we have the same education system?
Yeah, well, Sharon, when you look at Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi, we have similar geographical problems and benefits.
Yes.
So what happens in Zambia happens in Malawi, happens in Zimbabwe. And so the lesson and the problem that is in Zimbabwe will be close or similar to the problem that is in Malawi that is in here. And it is because of that we felt, can we work together in the region and put our efforts together so that we look and we look at this problem and address it in the best manner we must address. And when you look at promoting girls' education, it's very important because even infrastructure itself can stop a girl from coming to school. Sanitation, water and sanitation in the school would make that girl that should be progressing well to be absent from school. The distances and our cultural practices as African countries. So GEA is here to look at that and bring the CSOs together to see how best we must move. And again, we appeal to government, like Mr. CHANSA was saying. In the implementation of especially SDG 4 and reviewing and monitoring and evaluating it, we must involve the people on the ground. It is the people involved that know why girls are falling out of school.
Yes.
It is the people involved with that know the problems that girls are facing in their localities. And so these people must be involved. Look, there was in this village where women were drawing water from the river. And one well-wisher felt these women are moving, this is almost a kilometer drawing water. Can I dig the borehole in the middle of the village? And they went and dug the borehole in the middle of the village.
Without consulting.
Without asking the women. So the women continued going to 1
kilometer away.
1 kilometer away. Well, and this borehole remained a white elephant. They were not asked where they would want the borehole to be. According to them, away outside the village, that's where they were having chats as women and discussing issues as women. Away from the observation of their husbands, who would say, I saw you standing at the borehole, you are doing nothing. So they didn't want to be seen. So what that well-wisher would have done is call the women. Where do you want? Yes. In fact, the concern should have not been just distance, maybe clean water as well. So if you want these people to access clean water, ask them where they would want the borehole to be drilled. So if we want to promote girls' education in the rural areas, can we involve the people that are living there, that are keeping girls, that are sending girls to school? And then we'll sort out that problem.
Have you involved them under this project?
I don't know why he kept on mentioning Vubwi. I almost said that's where it comes from. Yeah,
that's where the first project is.
I remember Vubwi became very famous under Mr. Sata's.
I know when you go to Camp Sandodo, learners come from Mozambique and Malawi because of its remoteness.
Wow.
So that was a perfect example. And also to say that Eastern Province actually is a champion for early marriages. It tops the list amongst the 10 provinces of Zambia. Malawi has a similar problem. Zimbabwe has a similar problem. And talking about Zimbabwe, we went there last month. We discovered that that's why we have included the issues of farming communities.
Yes.
Remember, the history of Zimbabwe is that of a situation where white farmers had big farms. So on those farms, there are schools where the conditions were not very good for Africans. Now, after most farmers, white farmers left, actually the situation for education there has become much more worse. So we want to see the Zimbabwean government attend to that. If you look at the Zambian situation, you find, if you look at the educational statistical bulletin by the Ministry of Education, most of the girls that are falling pregnant are those between grade 5 and grade 7. Thousands of our girls falling pregnant. And a lot of our girls, actually, before they reach 19 years, are married off in rural areas. That's why I think last 3 weeks ago, we issued a statement to support the president when he gave a decree that the police must swing into action to arrest all parents who marry off children before they reach 21. Because when you look at the Marriage Act, it only allows a girl to get married after 21 years. Now, the danger is most of these girls are married off under the customary law. And customary law has no age limit. So when we sit down with government, and as government listens to us, we want government to attend to the customary law. We need also to put a limit. Because if you go to arrest this person in Vubwi, and they tell you that, no, my parent agreed, the chief agreed, or the village headman agreed, you can't arrest them. So the police may have a tough time to actualize the presidential decree. So the president can go further by interrogating the customary law, make sure that the House of Chiefs is also involved. Now, quickly answering your question about the GEAR project, if you have noticed, since we launched this project, yes, we have been very, very inclusive. We have involved the UN system, we have involved the media, we have involved the youth, the women, the women movement, and also other stakeholders like NGOCC, FAWEZA, those NGOs that are found in remote areas, those that have been dealing with women issues, so that together, as we chart this trajectory for 3 years, we see how best we can sit down, all of us as NGOs, the stakeholders, and also government, and see how best the girls can be helped.
In Vubwi.
In Vubwi and elsewhere.
In Vubwi specifically. I think we had a conversation with Patrick some time back when we were reading statistics in Eastern Province. You know, we receive a lot from there with regards to teenage pregnancies, to girl marriages, teenage marriages and stuff. So Patrick was convinced to say maybe this part of the country is doing well with regards of keeping records than any other country. The problem could be much bigger and could be countrywide, and maybe other provinces are not just recording. You know, could that be the case, Mr. Mumba?
It's also possible. It's also possible that maybe other provinces and other places are not managing that information.
Track the records.
Yeah, to track the records. But I think Eastern Province has been more pronounced because they have gone way beyond. The statistics.
Keeping our records.
We have a problem. I think even I taught there at some point.
Okay.
So you can literally tell why there's numbers escalate and they come out like that. Cultural practices. In fact, what looks, even children's kids, young primary going school children, we will talk about those and practice those openly. So we expect that maybe even other provinces may have the same problems. It's because they're not just tracking. So we may need to take interest as NAQEZ and the GEAR project to see, and this is why we have boundary partners in rural areas. So we need to interrogate whether it is that Eastern Province has that problem alone, or it is because we have people that are tracking record and keeping record, and they are good in analyzing data. We have to interrogate that.
But maybe just as a clear thought and some ray of hope is our chief in Eastern Province, Chief Mazimawe.
It's been very,
and is our darling as NAQEZ. We would want him to be part of this, because with him, any parent that marries off a child is kicked out of the kingdom, and that should be the example. And the plea is maybe to the Paramount Chief of the Ngoni people, and also Paramount Chief Gawaundi, to make sure that they also emulate Chief Mazimawe in making sure that Eastern Province should not make headlines for wrong reasons. Exactly. Because once you deny the girl child access to education, then you are denying this country the future. Now the girl must be side by side with the boy child. We are talking about gender parity now, where if you go into a class in Ngombe, you go into a class in Avonde or any other part of this country, we are seeing boys and girls almost at par. That is the norm that should be also in Eastern Province. We should wake up one day and read the statistics where Eastern Province is number last in terms of these numbers. It's very, very worrying that every year that we read the statistics, Eastern Province is number one. The traditional leaders must be worried. Actually, they must have even an endeavor, a serious endeavor to discuss this matter and see how best these figures can be changed.
All right. We are focusing our discussion today on VNR and bringing it back to this topic, Mr. CHANSA and Mr. MUMBA here. How often are these programs conducted, the VNRs? Is it every year? Is it after 3 months?
Yeah, as we said at the beginning of this program, VNRs are supposed to be conducted every year. Oh. It's a huge process because it involves a lot of consultations. If you do it very well, and also involving a lot of stakeholders, and then before you go to the high level UN political forum, there must be a validation, a process where the same stakeholders that you consulted must sit and say, yes, this is what is true on the ground. And in some instances, you find that the civil society organizations might also produce a parallel report, so that when the world compares with the government report, then the UN system might also want to come and interrogate on its own. But what is important is not to compete in reporting. We should not aim at just exposing the weaknesses for the sake of it. Yeah. It must be consultative, it must be inclusive, so that even when you have a lot of gaps, you go to the UN system and report, you are reporting what is actually on the ground.
Mr. MUMBA, do we have any other review mechanisms to ensure that these agendas that we are signatory to as a country are followed?
Yeah, we have various mechanisms that help us to track these activities and happenings in the country. One of them is the African peer review mechanism. Except most of these mechanisms have brought so much towards human rights. But then we must be quick to say we have these other mechanisms that help us to review these developments in countries, like you will hear from Mr. CHANSA. It is not only the voluntary national reviews that we have, but there are quite a number of them that help us to review and look at how we are doing, except maybe we have concentrated so much on human rights.
And just to write
peer review, really, when people are talking about the peer review, basically they talk about human rights.
Yes, I want to write on what he has said when he talks about Africa peer review mechanism. I've read the Africa Vision of 2063.
Yes.
Africa also dreams of being a prosperous continent. If you check through the continent of Africa, we have no reason to be poor. Africa is not a poor continent. Africa is a rich continent in terms of human resource. What is lacking is leadership, is also the way we exploit our resources, the way we govern ourselves, good governance. So the African peer review mechanism is one such mechanism that allows one country to review the other one. So that when you look at the governance aspect of Zambia as compared to Zimbabwe, where is Zambia doing fine, where is Zimbabwe doing fine, so that when you make comparisons, one of the countries must feel ashamed, must feel left behind, and pull up the socks if they are socks, so socks for countries. So African peer review mechanism is also one mechanism which is very important. It was very popular, I think, some 3-4 years ago. We don't hear about it now. These are the issues again where we need to knock the doors of our government to get updated, about some of these things. You know, when you go to the church leaders, to the traditional leaders, to the civil servants, and also the NGOs, very few of our people would discuss these matters because we have less information about them. They are very, very critical, and all of us must be aware about them.
So also to that we have universal peer reviews. So we universally, these are also some of the reviews that help us to monitor and evaluate how our countries and different countries are performing regarding these development goals, and how each country compared to the other is progressing. And so apart from that, we have the UPRs. UPRs also help us to review the developments of our countries.
As we draw to a close of this interview, you have spoken about your role as CSOs in as far as the VNRS is concerned and the Sustainable Development Goals. What is the role of members of the public generally? Because these SDGs are meant to understand that each one of us is affected in one way or the other. What is their role? How can they probably hold government accountable in ensuring that some of these SDGs, for example, Sustainable Development Goal number 4, is followed to the latter, and we attain the 10 that are under that?
Actually, Sharon, we cannot overemphasize the involvement of the general citizenry in inputting to voluntary national reviews. We said from the beginning, government is a driver. The rest of us are gatekeepers. We have to hold government accountable. We have said, and we have committed to SDG number 4, where we are saying we have to enhance access, inclusive education. How inclusive is our education system? It is only the citizens that should ask those questions. We have committed to having equitable and quality education. How quality is our education system? So, while government is the driver, we have a moral role and obligation as citizens to ensure what government has committed is monitored. We have a role as citizens to input and ring the bell. Government, you are departing from what you have committed. And so the involvement of citizens and the willingness of citizens themselves is very important. Because once we depart and we fail in these SDGs, the ultimate impact, negative impact, will be on the citizens. So we must be wary, we must be concerned, we must be involved, and we must be willing. There is no need for anyone to force us or to push us into holding government accountable. We are gatekeepers, and the gatekeeper should know their role. And the role of citizens in this whole process is inputting, whistleblowing, and ringing a bell to government to say we are departing from what we are supposed to do.
Yes, I was with the Minister of Information spokesperson on another platform, Mr. Tawakawana, and when he was told that now the UPND is in power, he refused. He said, we are not in power, we are in authority. The people with power, the people with power are the voters, the people. So that is a very powerful statement. The people that we elect are not in power. They are holding authority in trust. The Zambian people are the ones with power. So when we elect a team to lead us, it should not just end at electing them. We need to go further to hold them accountable over their promises, over the constitution, over the documents, the charters that they sign to implement. So as my colleague was saying, when we don't hold government to account, government is going to relax, or government will have its own priorities. At the end of the day, it is our people who are going to suffer. It is ourselves who are going to suffer. It is the quality education that is going to suffer. And you know very well that there is no country under the sun that can develop without quality education. So when we see some red signs, all citizens must be worried. We must use available channels to speak out. Today we have more than 112 radio stations in Zambia. We have more than 20-30 TV stations in Zambia. We have a lot of channels, like you can go to the MP, to the councillor, you can go to the president, you can go to the ministries and raise your concerns. There is no excuse for keeping quiet when things are not correct. The government has told us that this is now a free world. We need to speak. Obviously, we need to criticize objectively. We need to advise, so that at the end of the day, when we go to the world in 2030, this story must be a good story.
So Zambia first presented the VNR in 2020 under the auspices of the Ministry of National Development Planning. As you conclude, Mr. CHANSA,
yes,
why should we present this VNR in 2023, next year? Because I've heard you, I think, a couple of times mentioning next year. Why not this year? This is your concluding remark.
Yes, we approached the Minister of Finance. The excuse given was the COVID-19. And as he put it, plans are underway now to begin to prepare for the VNR for 2023. And that's why we are having this conversation, so that all stakeholders must know about this and begin to prepare. And finally, it is the supreme responsibility of government to involve all of us. Because if we are not invited for this VNR, we will not know when it will take place. We will not know what we need to contribute to this process. So government will do very well to make sure that all the young people, the disabled, the women, the church, the media, and also civil society organizations are included as they consult, so that the story which is going to be told at the UN is a story that reflects the reality on the ground.
Mr. MUMBA, 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. To add on what Mr. CHANSA says, we engage the Ministry of Finance on why we are presenting next year and not this year. As you may be aware, the 7th National Development Plan ended in
2021.
Yes. 2021. And so government is busy putting in place the 8th National Development Plan this year. And our hope is that all these issues we are raising will be addressed, because we said government is the driver. And the responsibility of government, part of the responsibility of government is to put all these problems that we are talking about, all these concerns that we are talking about, into the National Development Plan. So we feel, okay, government has said it is preparing this national document, very important, this year, and next year we will participate. This document must address the SDGs and the the voluntary national reviews concerns.
Okay. Thank you so much, gentlemen. In conversation, we've had the National Action for Quality Education in Zambia, NAQEZ, and on set was the Executive Director, Mr. Aaron CHANSA, and his Administration Manager, Mr. Rutherford MUMBA. We've had quite an elaborate discussion on the VNRS, also in full rather, voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews in relation to sustainable development goals. We can still continue the conversation on our socials as you preview this broadcast. My name is Sharon Kalimula. Thank you so much. Good afternoon.